September 14th, 1483. The chronicles speak of the Ravenswood family as if they were untouchable, lords who commanded loyalty, wealth, and fear. Their stone manor rose above the moors, its grey towers catching the morning light like the sharp edge of a blade. Villagers at the parish church would whisper that to serve the Ravenswoods was both an honor and a curse. This really happened, the historian's voice reminds. Letters, accounts, and even fragments of court records confirm the chain of events that followed. What you are about to hear are the first signs of a dynasty unraveling. Inside the manor, Lord Alistair Ravenswood kept court with his wife, Lady Eleanor, and their only surviving son, Thomas, then just 22. Servants carried in trenchers of bread and steaming mugs of bitter ale, while a small fire crackled in the great hearth. To any outsider, it was the picture of stability. But in the letters Eleanor would later write to her sister in York, the unease had already begun. There are nights when the corridors echo with footsteps, though all are asleep. The chapel candles extinguish themselves as if some breath unseen passes by. Alistair tells me it is the wind, but there is no wind in a sealed hall. The first incident came days later. A stable hand named Robert failed to return from the pastures. At first it seemed trivial. Men lost track of time or ran off with wages owed. But his horse returned alone, reins dragging, its coat streaked with mud as if it had been ridden hard. A search of the moors turned up nothing. Villagers muttered of poachers or thieves. In the market square, someone swore they saw Robert at the edge of the forest, pale and staring, as though waiting for something. But when men went to look, no one was there. By October, the household grew restless. Alistair's steward, old Jameson, reported that the accounts ledger had been tampered with, entries scratched away with a knife. Grain shipments listed as delivered had never arrived. Someone, it seemed, was working from within. On October 12, 1483, Eleanor noted the moment in her diary. The walls groan at night. I wake to the clatter of the door chain, though the doors are barred. I find Polaroid photographs in the drawer of Alistair's desk, images that could not exist in this time. A woman's face blurred, a man I do not know. Historians debate this entry. The use of the word photograph appears centuries before the technology was known. Some argue it was a mistranslation from the original Latin term she used, imago fixa, or fixed image. Others insist it is proof the Ravenswoods were haunted by something beyond explanation. What is certain is that unease spread through the manor. A typewriter, an anachronism impossibly out of place, was found in the coat closet near the servants' quarters, its keys rusted, ribbons snapped. To this day, no record explains how it arrived there. By All Hallows' Eve, the tension had reached the village. Parishioners at the church swore they saw Lady Eleanor kneeling long past midnight, clutching a hymnal so tightly her knuckles bled. She prayed as if she knew death was already in the room, said one witness years later, their words preserved in a testimony given to the local magistrate. Meanwhile, the family's allies began to falter. Sir William Darrow, a trusted confidant, cancelled a planned visit without explanation. A message delivered by payphone centuries later, found recorded on a cassette tape in the manor's storage unit, warned of betrayal. The voice on the tape was unmistakably Darrow's, though he had been dead for nearly 500 years. The night of November 2nd brought the clearest sign. A servant fetching water from the basement laundry swore she saw Thomas Ravenswood standing at the far end of the corridor. When she called his name, the figure turned and dissolved into smoke. Yet Thomas was upstairs at the time, asleep in his chamber. Fear gripped the household. Keys went missing. Doors that were bolted at dusk stood open by dawn. Eleanor claimed her Bible had been moved from the chapel to her bedside table, though no one admitted touching it. History preserves the facts, the narrator continues, but not the fear. And by the end of that winter, fear was the only thing that lived in the Ravenswood Manor. The final night of Part 1 comes in December. Snow lay thick across the moors, muffling sound, but inside the manor a different silence fell. Heavy, pressing, unnatural. Lady Eleanor awoke to find Alistair gone. His cloak still hung in the coat closet, his boots by the hearth. Only the door chain swung loose as if someone had forced it. On the stone floor a single Polaroid lay face down. When she turned it over, her breath froze. It showed the family seated at the long dining table. Their faces pale, their eyes hollow, and a shadow standing behind them. Hand resting on Alistair's shoulder, but the photograph bore a date in the corner, October 12, 1994, January 6, 1484, Ravenswood Manor. Yorkshire, the new year brought no comfort. Snow still clung to the manor's slate roof, icicles sharp as blades hanging from its stone arches. Inside, a hush followed every step, as though the house itself was listening. This stage of the story has been confirmed through overlapping accounts, the narrator explains. A steward's notes, fragments from Eleanor's diary, and even testimonies taken decades later align with what occurred that winter. Thomas Ravenswood sat at the oak table, a mug of bitter ale before him, though he hadn't touched it. He kept staring at the Polaroid photograph his mother had found on Christmas Eve. The pale faces of his family stared back, the date stamped with chilling certainty, October 12, 1994. "It cannot be," Thomas muttered. His voice cracked. This is witchcraft." Lady Eleanor placed her hand over his, steady but cold. "It is warning us, Thomas. These are not tricks. Your father is gone, and this," she tapped the photo with her finger, "is what we are left with." That night the strangeness escalated. At precisely 2:37 a.m., the servants awoke to the echo of a typewriter clattering in the coat closet. When the steward, Jameson, opened the door with a lantern, the closet was empty. Only the faint smell of smoke lingered, as if the keys had been hot metal moments earlier. By morning, another item had vanished, the family's silver crucifix from the chapel altar. In its place lay a hymnal, pages water-stained, with a line underlined in red ink. "The shadows shall sit among you." The townsfolk grew restless. At the parish church, Father Mallory spoke cautiously. "I hear the bells ringing at night when the tower is empty. It is not men calling. It is something else." His words reached Eleanor through hushed gossip, and she wept openly in the pews, clutching her Bible so tightly the leather cracked. On February 18, 1484, Thomas confided in a visiting knight, Sir William Darrow. But Darrow's hands trembled as he lit a Lucky Strike cigarette by the great hearth, a detail impossible for the time, yet noted in Eleanor's diary. "You must be careful," Darrow warned, smoke curling into the rafters. "There are men who would see your bloodline end." "And there are things—" "Older than men," Thomas frowned. "What things?" Darrow didn't answer. He ground the cigarette into a pewter dish and left the hall without another word. By dawn, he had vanished from the manor entirely. His horse remained in the stable, saddle-strapped, untouched. March brought heavier disturbances. Servants swore they heard voices through the payphone that had appeared near the kitchen wall, another impossibility. When Jameson lifted the receiver, he heard only static, then a whisper. "Check the basement laundry." That night, Thomas descended with a lantern. The laundry was still, piles of linen smelling faintly of lye. But on the floor lay a cassette tape, black plastic glinting in the firelight. He wound it with his finger, pressed it against his ear. A voice, his father's voice, spoke faintly. "Do not trust the blood of Ravenswood." Thomas dropped the tape. His lantern sputtered, almost extinguishing. He ran back upstairs, his breath visible in the icy corridor. Meanwhile, the manor itself seemed to warp. Doors that had stood square for centuries now tilted, hinges creaking under unseen weight. The door chain at the main entrance swayed, though no one touched it. Eleanor's Bible went missing, only to reappear days later in the dormitory above the stables. Open to revelation. On March 29, 1484, Eleanor confided to her sister in another letter, later recovered from a York boarding house. "Every night the footsteps grow louder. It is as if a host of men march through the halls, though when I rise with my candle, there is nothing. Only Thomas remains steadfast, though his eyes darken with each dawn. He dreams of betrayal. He says someone within these walls means to end us." The climax of Part 2 unfolded on April 3, 1484. A heavy storm rolled over the moors, lightning striking the parish church steeple. Inside Ravenswood Manor, power surged through objects that did not belong in that century. Flashlights flickered on by themselves. The cassette tape spun without hands. Eleanor, clutching her coat, hurried to the storage unit beneath the stairs, searching for candles. Instead, she found a door she had never noticed before. It was narrow, hidden behind shelves of grain. Its iron latch bore no rust, as if it had been opened recently. She called out for Thomas. He came, holding the family's only working lantern. "Mother, this should not be here." The wind rattled the windows. The door chain above clinked, then fell silent. Together they pushed the hidden door open. A cold draft spilled out, carrying the smell of damp stone and something metallic, blood or rust. Inside, darkness stretched deep, too deep for a manor this size, as Eleanor lifted the lantern high. Its glow caught something scrawled on the wall in red. Letters jagged, uneven. He still walks. The lantern flickered. Somewhere in the blackness, footsteps began to echo, slow and deliberate. Coming closer, April 4th, 1484, Ravenswood Manor, Yorkshire. The door to the hidden passage had not been marked in any plan of the house. Generations of Ravenswoods had lived and died without mention of it in their ledgers, their wills, or the steward's careful records. And yet, when Eleanor and Thomas stood before it that storm-lashed night, there it was, iron latch gleaming as if freshly forged. This account, the narrator explains, comes from combined testimonies. Eleanor's surviving letters, the steward Jameson's record, and fragments of later archaeological notes all point to the discovery of what was called simply the hidden room. Thomas held the lantern ahead. The flame hissed in the draught, casting thin light on the passage. Damp stone walls closed in tightly, with drops of water sliding down like beads of sweat. "Stay close," Thomas whispered. Eleanor clutched her coat tighter. "Alistair may be here," or what's left of him. The corridor sloped down into the earth. Cobwebs brushed their faces, the air turning metallic, heavy. They counted 12 steps before the tunnel opened into a small chamber. At the center stood an oak table, its surface gouged with deep cuts. On it lay objects impossible for their century. A diner coffee mug with chipped enamel, a Bible with gilded pages warped by water, a battered Polaroid photo showing the manor itself, yet with cars and telephone poles in the background. Eleanor staggered back. "What sorcery is this?" Thomas picked up the Polaroid. Written across the back in hurried script were the words, "Do not trust the parish." That same morning, Jameson the steward claimed he heard chanting from the parish church. Bells rang though no mass was scheduled. When he crossed the snowy field to investigate, he found the doors barred. A single hymnal lay on the steps, pages damp, underlined in black ink. "The righteous shall fall within their own walls." The parish priest, Father Mallory, denied leaving the hymnal there. But villagers whispered he had grown pale and thin, his hands trembling when he lifted the chalice at service. Back inside the manor, Thomas searched the hidden chamber further. At the far wall stood a tall coat closet, its door slightly ajar. When he opened it, moth-eaten cloaks slumped forward, and from behind them came a faint metallic click. He reached in, pulling free a rusted cassette tape recorder. Though the device had no batteries, when Eleanor touched it, the reels began to spin. Alistair's voice emerged, faint, warped by static. "Blood has betrayed us. I walked into the parish that night, and I never walked out. He waits among them." The reels spun faster, then stopped. Eleanor dropped the recorder, her hands shaking. "Thomas, this is your father's voice." "I know it. Maysu, 1484, Ravenswood Manor." The household began to unravel. Servants reported seeing men in the corridors, strangers in long coats smoking Marlboro cigarettes, their faces blurred like figures in a Polaroid. One maid swore she saw Lady Eleanor speaking to one of them in the storage unit, though Eleanor herself had no memory of it. At night, doors banged against chains, though they were bolted shut. Footsteps climbed the staircase one by one, pausing at each landing, until they reached Thomas's door. He sat awake, clutching a flashlight found in the hidden chamber, its cold beam sweeping across the room. Each time the footsteps stopped, he whispered into the dark, "Show yourself." But nothing came. Only silence. By June, more evidence of betrayal surfaced. Letters Thomas had written to allies in York never arrived. Couriers vanished along the highway route. Jameson, checking the manor's accounts, discovered entire grain shipments had been rerouted, signed for by someone using Alistair's hand. Yet Alistair was gone. The villagers began to avoid the Ravenswoods. Rumors spread in the market square. The family consorted with spirits that the parish itself had condemned them. On June 18, 1484, Eleanor discovered another message. This time it was carved into the wood of the dining table, though no one admitted to doing it. The words read, "He is in the walls." That night, Thomas pressed his ear against the stone of the manor. For hours, he swore he heard breathing, slow, steady, just beyond the surface. The most chilling moment came on July 9th, 1484. Lightning split the sky again as a storm swept over the moors. In the manor, Eleanor gathered the servants in the hall, determined to pray. She clutched her Bible. Jameson held a hymnal. Others whispered psalms under their breath. Then the door chain rattled violently. The main door buckled, though no one touched it. From the coat closet came the grinding clatter of the typewriter, striking out words by itself. Jameson stepped forward, lantern raised, and read aloud as the keys hammered furiously. "Open the fire escape." Everyone turned to Thomas. "There is no fire escape," he said. "Not in this house." But when the lightning flashed again, they saw it. A metal staircase clinging to the manor's outer wall, leading down into the dark, though it had never been there before. Eleanor's breath caught. "It wants us to leave." Thomas gripped her arm. "Or it wants us to follow." As the storm howled outside, the servants begged them not to go near it. But the family knew the truth could no longer be ignored. From this moment, records grow darker. Witnesses vanish, accounts conflict. But every source agrees. The fire escape led to places no man should walk. July 10th, 1484. Ravenswood Manor, Yorkshire. The fire escape clung to the outer wall like a parasite of iron and shadow. In the stormlight it looked rusted, weather-beaten, as if it had stood there for centuries. Yet everyone swore it had never existed until that night. The servants refused to go near it. Only Eleanor and Thomas dared approach. This is the part of the story where fear became tangible, the narrator explains. What began as whispers and vanishing objects turned into a confrontation none of them could deny. Thomas tested the steps first. His boots clanged against metal slick with rain, the flashlight in his hand slicing through the dark. Below, the staircase seemed to vanish into the storm. "Mother, stay behind me," he called, but Eleanor shook her head. "If it is Alistair down there, we go together." Behind them, Jameson the steward and two servants clutched candles, their faces pale. "My lord," Jameson whispered, "this is folly. The parish has already marked us. Do not step further into their snare." Thomas ignored him. He lifted the flashlight and began to descend. The staircase twisted, each landing bringing them lower until they reached a door that had no right to exist. It was wooden, bound in iron, set into the very foundation of the manor. Carved across the surface were words in Latin: "Intra perditio, enter perdition." Thomas pressed his ear against the wood. From within came faint scratching like quills across parchment, then a man's voice, his father's. "Thomas." "Open!" Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's him." But when Thomas reached for the latch, the door chain above their heads rattled violently, as if warning them back. Inside the manor, things worsened. The servants who had remained in the hall heard the typewriter clattering again. When they rushed to the coat closet, the machine was typing a single line over and over: "Do not trust the walls." At the same moment, the payphone in the kitchen rang. One of the maids, shaking, lifted the receiver. A hiss of static filled her ear, followed by a voice she swore was Eleanor's. "Leave the house. Leave us. He is here." But Eleanor was outside on the fire escape. Thomas forced the hidden door open. Lantern light spilled into a narrow stairwell descending deeper into the earth. The air was colder here, damp and metallic, heavy with the scent of rust or blood. At the bottom was a chamber lit by candles that seemed to burn without flame. On the walls hung Polaroid photographs pinned with iron nails, images of the Ravenswoods through the centuries. Each family member seated at the same long table, their faces pale and hollow, and always behind them the same shadow figure, hand resting on a shoulder. Eleanor stumbled back. "This is impossible," Thomas gritted his teeth. "Or it is the truth of our bloodline." From the far corner of the chamber came movement. A man stepped forward, Alistair Ravenswood. His cloak hung in tatters, his eyes dull yet glowing faintly in the candlelight. "Thomas," he said, voice cracked like old wood. "Eleanor, you should not have come." Eleanor reached for him. "Alistair, where have you been?" "What is this place?" Alistair shook his head slowly. "Not all blood is loyal. Not all walls are ours. I walked into the parish that night, thinking I was master of men. I walked out as their prisoner." Thomas's voice trembled. "Prisoner of who?" Alistair's lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. of what waits in the walls. The candles flared, and suddenly the chamber shook. From the stone itself came shapes, limbs, faces pressing outward as if trapped behind a thin veil. Their mouths moved soundlessly, eyes wide with terror. Eleanor screamed. Thomas raised the flashlight, the beam catching dozens of pale faces before they slid back into the walls. Alistair stepped closer. They betrayed us, Thomas. Our own kin. The parish sealed this covenant. If you remain, you will be next. Back in the hall above, Jameson saw cracks forming along the ceiling. Dust rained down, hymnals fluttered from the shelves. The Bible Eleanor had left on the table slammed shut on its own. One servant shouted, "The house is breaking!" The typewriter struck its final words before snapping in half. He walks now. Below, the hidden chamber roared with sound. The Polaroids fluttered from the walls, circling like leaves in a storm. The cassette tape recorder at Eleanor's feet clicked on by itself, Alistair's voice repeating, "Do not trust the blood of Ravenswood." Eleanor clutched Thomas's arm. "We must leave." But Alistair blocked the stare. His face twisted, and for a moment his skin seemed to slip, revealing the same shadow that had stalked the photographs. "You cannot leave," it whispered in his voice. "You are already mine." The candles blew out, plunging them into darkness. Only the beam of Thomas's flashlight cut through the void, and in that beam stood the figure, the same shadow, hand reaching out, fingers long as iron nails. Witnesses claim the manor shook that night. Some say lightning struck the parish. Others insist the Ravenswoods never returned from the chamber. What is certain is that the confrontation marked the turning point. From here, survival was no longer certain, only betrayal. July 11, 1484, Ravenswood Manor, Yorkshire. The iron-bound door at the base of the impossible staircase swung inward with a groan that echoed like a dying animal. Eleanor and Thomas stepped inside, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the dust. The chamber was larger than expected, stone walls slick with damp, the ceiling dripping, the air heavy with mildew and candle smoke. At the center stood a table. Upon it lay two objects, a dagger with fresh blood along its edge, and a parchment bearing Alistair's seal. Eleanor's hand shook as she reached for the parchment. She read aloud, "They took me. They wear familiar faces, but they are not men. The parish hides them. The manor feeds them. If you hear me in the walls, do not answer. They feed on reply." Her voice faltered. Thomas clenched the dagger, knuckles white. "If Father is alive, he's prisoner here. And if he's gone..." He looked at Eleanor, unable to finish. At that moment, the walls themselves stirred. The stone seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like a lung. A low murmur rose, dozens of voices speaking at once. Jameson and the servants staggered back, their candles flickering wildly. One voice separated from the rest. Alistair's voice. "Do not stay." The cassette recorder Eleanor carried crackled to life without batteries. The reel spun, replaying Alistair's words over and over. "Do not stay. Do not stay." Eleanor pressed her hands to her ears. "He's warning us." But Thomas shook his head. "Or something wants us gone before we discover the truth." That same night, the parish bells tolled. Yet it was not Sunday, nor any feast day. The sound carried across the moors, slow, deliberate, like a funeral march. Driven by fury, Thomas returned to the chamber beneath the fire escape. The parchment remained, but the dagger was gone. Instead, on the table sat the Polaroid they had seen before. Only now the image showed not the manor, but the parish church. Its doors stood open, and in the doorway was the blurred outline of a man. Eleanor's breath caught. "That's him. That's Alistair." Thomas held the photo closer. For the first time, the blurred figure's face sharpened. It was indeed Alistair Ravenswood, but his eyes were hollow, dark pits. By dawn, Ravenswood Manor had fallen into panic. Servants fled across the fields. Jameson packed what records he could and begged Eleanor to leave with him. But she refused. "This house has kept us for generations," she said. "If it holds my husband now, I will not abandon him." Thomas stood at her side, though doubt gnawed at him. He could no longer tell if Alistair was alive, dead, or something in between. The final straw came that evening. The typewriter in the hidden chamber began to hammer again, its keys striking furiously. Thomas and Eleanor rushed to it, lantern light casting long shadows. Words spilled onto the page in jagged strokes. Midnight. The parish. Bring the dagger. Eleanor looked to her son. It's a trap, Thomas set his jaw. Or it's the only chance we'll ever have to know the truth. As the storm gathered once more over the Yorkshire moors, mother and son prepared to walk into the parish, carrying with them the weight of generations, and the weapon that might end the curse of Ravenswood once and for all. July 12, 1484, the parish of Ravenswood, Yorkshire. The storm broke as Eleanor and Thomas crossed the moors, the dagger wrapped in cloth, the church's bells tolling without hands to move them. Each step forward felt like trespass into something older than faith, older than the manor itself. The parish doors stood open. Inside, candles burned in rows, though no one had lit them. The altar was draped in black, the air sharp with the scent of iron and ash. And there he was. Alistair Ravenswood knelt before the altar, his head bowed. His cloak was tattered, his skin pale, his body trembling as though some invisible chain bound him in place. Alistair! Eleanor's voice cracked as it echoed through the nave. He raised his head slowly. His eyes were indeed hollow pits, yet within them flickered a faint human light. You should not have come. Thomas tightened his grip on the dagger. We're here to bring you back. Alistair shook his head. There is no return. The parish bound me when I tried to sever their covenant. The manor feeds them still. The walls, the whispers, the bells. If the dagger touches my heart, the line breaks. But so does everything we have built. A sound rippled through the pews then, like countless bodies shifting at once. Shadows rose between the columns, shapes with faces half familiar, servants, villagers, ancestors, yet twisted, blurred, and wrong. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering, "Do not free him. Stay with us. Stay forever." Eleanor clutched her rosary. "Thomas, do not listen." Alistair's voice cut through the whispers. "The dagger must choose. End me and free this family. Spare me and the curse consumes you next." Thomas felt his mother's eyes on him. For a heartbeat, the weight of generations pressed into his chest. He stepped forward, blade shaking in his hand. The shadowed congregation leaned closer, their whispers rising, their mouths stretching unnaturally wide. "Father," Thomas said, voice breaking. "Forgive me." Alistair smiled faintly, as though at last unburdened. "You have my blessing, my son." Thomas drove the dagger home. The church erupted. The candles exploded in showers of sparks, the bells crashed to the ground, and the shadows shrieked as though the stone itself burned. Eleanor shielded her face as the roof split, the storm pouring in, lightning tearing across the sky. At the altar, Alistair's body crumbled into ash that scattered in the wind. The whispers silenced. The parish was empty. By dawn, the moors were still. Ravenswood Manor stood quiet, its walls no longer breathing, its corridors no longer alive with unseen footsteps. The fire escape was gone. The typewriter sat lifeless. Thomas and Eleanor returned home together, grief etched into every line of their faces. But the curse was broken. For the first time in centuries, the manor was only stone and wood. Eleanor pressed her hand to the window frame, tears wetting her cheeks. "We have lost him. But he gave us back the house, the name, the future." Thomas set the dagger, now rusted and dull, upon the mantel. "No, Mother. He gave us back our freedom." And so ended the legend of Ravenswood Manor, not with triumph, not with despair, but with sacrifice. A family restored by the price of its own blood. The end.